When you think of Cusco, what comes to mind? For most of us, it's the incredible Inca history, right? Machu Picchu, the ancient stonework. But beneath all that history, there's a really urgent modern story unfolding. We're going to explore how this amazing city is actually standing on a climate precipice, and what that really means for its future.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Cusco is way up there, 3,400 meters high in the Andes, tucked into a valley right where several rivers come together. Now, for the Incas, this was a brilliant strategic move. But today, well, that stunning setting is also the source of some of its biggest environmental challenges.
And here's a number that really tells you a lot about the city's vulnerability. 80%. That is the estimated share of buildings in Cusco made from adobe. You know, that traditional sun-dried mud brick. It's beautiful, it's historic, but it is incredibly vulnerable to heavy, sustained rain. Exactly the kind of weather that's becoming more and more common.
And that really gets to the heart of the matter here. You have this contrast, this tension between Cusco, the world treasure, and Cusco, the city, whose very foundations are at risk.
You know, this quote really nails it. Cusco was the heart of the Inca Empire, and its streets are this incredible mix of original Inca stonework with Spanish colonial buildings literally built right on top. This layering of history is what makes the city so unique and precious, but it also makes it incredibly complicated to protect.
And look, this isn't just some abstract risk we're talking about. Back in 2010, absolutely devastating floods hit the region. We're talking $250 million in losses. And 17,000 jobs just gone, temporarily suspended. Most of those were in tourism, which is the city's lifeblood. It was a massive wake-up call. Okay, so if we're going to figure out how to protect Cusco, we have to first understand why it's so vulnerable. Let's break it down, starting with the natural risks that are just, well, they're baked right into the landscape.
Yeah, you could call Cusco a natural hazard hotspot. I mean, you've got this wild mix of steep, irregular hills, it's in a seismically active zone, and it's right where these rivers meet. It's basically a perfect storm for floods and landslides. The very things that make the landscape so dramatic also make it really dangerous.
And these official hazard maps from the city itself really show you the scale of what we're dealing with. Just look. On the left, you can see all the areas vulnerable to flooding, right along those river corridors. And then on the right, the landslide risk is just as clear, especially on those steep slopes all around the city.
This chart of flood events really drives one point home. This happens all the time. These aren't once-in-a-century disasters. They're a consistent, recurring problem, and you can see some years had multiple severe floods.
But, nature is only part of the story. The risks are being cranked up to 11 by human factors, specifically the city's incredibly fast and largely unregulated expansion.
Now, this is a really important number to wrap your head around. As Cusco has grown, about 80% of its recent expansion has been informal. It's been unplanned. What that means on the ground is that whole new neighborhoods are popping up without proper oversight, often pushing people directly into the most hazardous areas. So when you put all these pieces together, you get this perfect storm of social risk. You have unplanned growth pushing poorer communities onto dangerous slopes. Their homes are often made of that vulnerable adobe we talked about, and their livelihoods depend on a tourism economy that can be shut down by a single disaster. Each risk just makes the others worse. So let's just connect all those dots for a second. What does this all mean on the ground? It means the people with the fewest resources living in the most vulnerable buildings are being concentrated in the most dangerous locations, the steep, unstable slopes on the edges of the city. Okay, so we have the natural risks, we have the human pressure, and now we have to add the final, massive piece of the puzzle, the threat multiplier, climate change. How is it going to make this already tricky situation even worse? The science on this is pretty clear. By the 2040s, climate models project that Cusco is going to warm up by somewhere between 1.7 and 2.3 degrees Celsius. And that's not just about feeling a bit warmer, it's going to have huge knock-on effects for the entire local weather system. This table breaks down just how much the seasons are expected to change. The rainy season, it's projected to get hotter, wetter, and even longer. And the dry season, it's likely to become warmer, drier, and shorter. So you're increasing the risk of both floods and droughts. And here's a really interesting and kind of scary detail. The projections don't necessarily point to more gigantic, powerful storms. Instead, they suggest more frequent, rainy days, even if the rain itself isn't as severe. But that constant, nagging rainfall can keep the soil totally saturated, which dramatically increases the risk of landslides and floods without a single massive downpour.
So, that's the problem, and it is a massive one. But it is not a hopeless situation. Far from it. Now we're going to shift gears and look at the solutions. A blueprint that's been designed to help Cusco build some real resilience for the future.
At the heart of the plan is this really fundamental shift in thinking. It's about moving away from just reacting to disasters after they've already happened and instead getting ahead of them. It's about proactively reducing risk and building climate adaptation into the city's DNA.
And the plan tackles this in two ways. You've got what are called structural measures. These are the physical fixes, things like building better flood defenses or improving drainage systems. And then you have non-structural measures, which are all about policy, better zoning laws, smarter land use planning, and collecting better data.
And the plan to get there follows a pretty clear logical path. First, you start with the basics, accurately map the risk zones and get better data. Then, you take that knowledge and integrate it into city planning. And finally, you link the city's economic goals, like tourism, directly to its environmental resilience. It all has to work together.
And it's so important to remember that this isn't a quick fix. This is a long-term vision. The plan is broken down into phases, starting with the most urgent needs, like managing key rivers. Then it moves to bigger policy changes and public awareness. And finally, it tackles the really tough long-term challenge of relocating communities in the highest risk areas.
And that really brings us to the most crucial point of this whole plan. Protecting Cusco isn't about one or two big projects. Its survival, its resilience, depends on weaving climate preparedness into the very fabric of how the city runs, into its economic plans, its urban planning, everything. It has to be part of every single decision.
So, we're left with this one big question, really. Cusco is a city that the whole world loves, a city that's defined by its incredible past. But as it faces this modern challenge, maybe its greatest legacy won't be the one it inherited from the Incas, but the one it chooses to build for itself, a truly resilient future.